Magandang araw mga ka-aerial defense, may ibabahagi na naman ako sa inyo. Dahil ngayong araw na ito ay may pag-uusapan tayo tungkol sa depensa, militar ng China na galit at nagbabala sa Pilipinas. Pero bago tayo magpatuloy, huwag mo muna kalimutan mag-like, share and subscribe. Manatiling nakatutok sa aming channel para updated ka sa balitang militar at West Philippine Sea. Binalaan ng China noong Sabado ang Pilipinas na itigil ang provocations nito sa pinagtatalo ng maritime waters, partikular na ang mga aktibidad na may kinalaman sa partisipasyon ng United States. Ginawa ng China ang babala isang araw matapos ang Pilipinas, US at Japan ay nagsagawa ng joint maritime drills malapit sa Panatag o Scarborough Shoal sa West Philippine Sea. Habang bumisita ang US Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth sa Maynila upang muling pagtibayin ang matatag na pangako ng Amerika sa pinakamatagal na kasunduan nito sa Asia, habang nagpapatuloy ang joint drills, nagsagawa ang militar ng China ng tinatawag nitong routine patrols mula sa malayo, sinabi ng isang tagapagsalita para sa Southern Theater Command ng People's Liberation Army, na ang Pilipinas ay madalas na nagpatala ng mga dayuhang bansa upang mag-organisa ng mga joint patrol na naglalayong palaganapan ang mga iligal na pag-aangkin sa South China Sea. Sinabi ng PLA na ang PLA Southern Theater Command ay patuloy na nasa high alert upang protektahan daw ang pambansang soberanya ng China. Muling binalaan ng China ang Pilipinas sa alyansa nito sa Amerika sa gitna ng panibagong hakbang ng dalawang bansa, na pagpapahusay pa ng military cooperation kasabay ng pagbisita sa bansa ni US Defense Chief Pete Hegseth. Pinuna din ni Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Guo Jiaquan ang kamakailang pahayag mula kay Hegseth na kasalukuyang nasa 2 days visit sa bansa at nanawagan sa Pilipinas na itigil ang paglikha ng anyay instability. Anuman aniya ang kooperasyong mayroon ang US at Philippines, hindi dapat nito i-target o sirain ng anumang third party. Iwasan ang pagpapakalat ng mga akusasyon sa mga kathang-isip na banta para mag-udyok ng confrontation sa kaalyado nito at magpasidhi ng tensyon sa rehiyon. Ikinatwiran pa ng Chinese official na ang kalayaan sa paglalayag at pagpapalipad ay hindi kailanman problema sa pinagtatalo ng karagatan. Sa halip, inakusahan niya ang Amerika bilang isa sa umano'y nagsusulsul sa mga provokasyon ng mga kaalyado nito, na tinawag ng China na banta at i-claim na isang concern ang freedom of navigation sa contested region. Binatikos din ito ang US sa pagpapadala ng mas marami pang military resource sa rehiyon na nakakasira umano sa kapayapaan at stability.
都不应该针对第三方或者损害第三方的利益，更不应该渲染所谓威胁、挑动对抗、加剧地区的紧张。我想强调的是，南海的航行和飞越自由从来都不存在任何问题。一直以来，在南海纵容盟友挑衅滋事的是美方，一再编造中国威胁南海航行自由伪命题的也是美方，持续在本地区强化军事部署，妄图破坏地区和平稳定的还是美方。美方应该摒弃冷战思维，停止挑动意识形态对抗，停止在南海挑事生非，在地区挑拨离间，不要做南海的搅局者和肇事方。我们也奉劝菲方不要依美闹海，更不要试图挑起军事对抗。
Tinalakay ni US Senator Pete Ricketts, ang pangalawang ranggo na Republican sa Senate Foreign Relations Committee, ang kahalagahan ng pagpapanatili ng mga alyansa ng Amerika sa Indo-Pacific. Nakatuon si Ricketts sa kung paano nakatulong ang pangunahing alyansa ng Amerika sa Pilipinas na hadlangan ng komunistang China.
Very important topic. You know, since signing of the 1951 Mutual Defense Treaty, the Philippines has been one of our key allies in the Pacific. However, in recent years, the alliance has grown both more important and even more key as far as our strategic alignment. Despite being outmatched militarily and economically, the Philippines have demonstrated an incredible resolve in resisting Beijing's unlawful aggression in the South China Sea, certainly more recently. It is also able to act as an important voice within the ASEAN against Communist China's other pressure campaigns that you all have been talking about. But the most important is what the alliance provides us militarily. And Mr. Shriver, you were talking about the expansion of the EDCA bases and the 9 strategic sites that they've given us access to enhance our ability to deter Communist China in the Taiwan Strait, the South China Sea, and other key theaters. It's also allowed us to deploy the Typhoon missile system, which can hold land-based targets. And China at risk, as well as surface ships. How important is it for us to continue to work with Manila to expand U.S. access to these sites and further invest in the infrastructure and housing for U.S. troops, Mr. Schreiber?
Thank you. I think it's extraordinarily important, and if you kind of racked and stacked in the region, I would put the Philippines right at the top of where we need to invest, given its geography and given a window of opportunity. You know, the last administration in Manila under President Duterte wasn't exactly user-friendly, if you will. Marcos has been a sea change, and really more of a return to the norm, but a sea change nonetheless, and I think we should take advantage of that. And frankly, the population, given Chinese aggression and coercion, is also very much in support of strengthening U.S.-Philippine ties, and I think it's the time to make the investments that are needed.
Great. And, you know, we were just talking about China's really aggressive position toward the Philippines and these gray zone attacks. In the South China Sea, you mentioned some of the areas there. It's really, really valuable that Manila shows this defiance, isn't it, Mr. Schreiber?
It is. They're, of course, first and foremost responsible for their own defense, and I think they have done a very admirable job on these resupply missions to Second Thomas Shoal, really resisting that Chinese pressure and coercion.
So what else can we or Japan or Australia do to be able to support the Philippines as they resist this gray zone activity here in the South China Sea?
Well, I think Chinese coercion is not limited to South China Sea, so I think pushback in the East China Sea, pushback in areas closer to Vietnam. It's a comprehensive approach that is led by the U.S. but joined with allies and partners will, I think, demonstrate to the Chinese that they've got a broader problem, that the country that signed UNCLOS and ratified it but does not honor it and acts outside it is going to face broad pushback. And then on point in the Philippines, I do think we need to resume our cooperation with the Philippine Coast Guard, which is now on pause because it's a state INL program and it's a law enforcement program. The Coast Guard is really on the front lines, not necessarily the Navy in every case. So I think there's a number of things we can do, and again, it's extraordinarily important.
What about the cooperation between Japan and the Philippines? They've recently, gotten some agreements together. What do you think about that?
Very encouraging. I mean, if you looked at a map, Japan, Philippines, what's in the middle? It's Taiwan. And I think a lot of the security cooperation is oriented toward that major known contingency. But Japan is also stepping up with security assistance. So we are no longer the sole provider or only provider of military equipment and other training and other types of services. Japan is a very professional military, and they're lending that expertise to the Philippines in very helpful ways. Yeah.
I think we've provided about $500 million last year in FMS to the Philippines, and obviously it's encouraging to see Japan do that as well. And you were also talking about the percent of GDP that the Philippines is spending and valuing the bases and so forth. Is it fair for us to ask the Philippines to get to 2% of GDP spending on their own defense? I mean, they are trying to modernize here.
I'm for being aspirational, and I think given the threat they're facing, it's reasonable to ask. I think those discussions, that's why we need skilled diplomats, that's why we need capable alliance managers with years of experience. I agree there are some approaches, as Dr. Mastro pointed out, that can have negative effects, and so I think we need to do it with a degree of deftness, but it is important.
Do the Philippines have that kind of capability? I mean, can they economically support 2% of GDP, do you think?
The short answer, I would say, is yes. But it is a very robust democracy. They have a lot of other priorities when it comes to the development of the economy. So this would be grinding it out through the legislature, but I think they could get there given the threat and the very real requirements they have for defense.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Schreiber.
Para sa mas madaming update tungkol sa ating depensa, paki-follow at like muna ng aming page na nasa description na ang link. Huwag mo na rin kalimutan mag-like, share and subscribe. Pindutin mo na rin ang bell para updated kayo sa aking mga bagong video. Maraming salamat po.